Israel has just launched an offensive on Wednesday against the Gaza Strip. There had been some rockets fired into Israel. There were about 8 people that were hurt. Nobody had gotten killed. So, of course, Israel decided that they would do massively disproportionate strike back, as has been the case for a while now. Last time they did an incursion into the Gaza Strip, some Israelis had definitely been hurt through that whole process. 13 were killed, in fact. That's why they killed 1,400 Palestinians, over a 100-to-1 ratio. And of course, the U.S. said, yay, and cheered on. Were civilians killed? Absolutely. But when Palestinians kill civilians, they're terrorists. When Israelis kill civilians, it's just collateral damage. So I'm not in favor of killing civilians on either side. I think it's grotesque. So what's happening this time around? Well, one of the Israeli leaders said, some of the Israelis were having trouble sleeping at night because of the really primitive rockets that the Hamas was firing in. Now, should Hamas fire rockets into Israel? Absolutely not. And 8 people actually did get hurt. So is it a serious issue? No question about it. Does it mean that Israel should resort to this kind of strike back? Obviously, I don't think so. So let me begin to tell you what has happened. The Hamas military chief, Ahmed Jabri, has been assassinated. He's been killed. Now, we're about to show you what Israeli Defense Forces put up on YouTube. They're not just bragging about this. Obviously, they're trying to intimidate the other side. But they're actually showing video of his murder. So this is what they put up on their own YouTube account. You're going to see a bomb. The person, 2 people inside the car will be killed. There was a Hamas photographer. I'm sure he had it coming too. But I'm just giving you a warning. That is what's going to happen. It's quick. Here it is. So they're proud about how pinpoint this accuracy on their bombs are, and boom, of course, he was killed immediately, and they dragged out pieces of his body from that wreckage. Now, a lot of people say he was a terrorist, and they will celebrate. And you see the aftermath right there. Now, of course, the Hamas and some of the Palestinians thought that he was one of their political leaders. Now, Hamas did win the elections in the Gaza Strip. Of course, elections are just for our allies. If we don't agree with what your democratic elections came up with, well, then we get to execute your leaders. Now, people will say he's their military leader. Okay. Well, Ehud Barak is the military leader of Israel. He's their defense minister. Now, what do you think would be Israeli reaction, U.S. reaction, world reaction if Hamas assassinated Ehud Barak? How many thousands of people would they kill in the Palestinian territories? That would be completely unacceptable, and they would be terrorists, right? But killing Hamas's military leader, well, he had it coming. And oh, the photographer, collateral damage. Okay, now, were their bombs so smart? Well, I don't know. Unless they intended these consequences, we'll have to ask them about it, because it turns out there are a great number of deaths that have happened, because that bomb was not the only one. Now, the health ministry inside the Palestinian territories say that 10 people, including 3 children, were killed because they did a series of bombings, and about 40 were wounded. And among the dead were an 11-month-old baby and a woman pregnant with twins. But I'm sure they all had it coming. Now, if you don't believe the health ministry, Reuters reports that 7 people, including 2 girls under the age of 5, were killed. But I'm sure they all had it coming. You see, when Arabs or Muslims kill civilians, they're terrorists. When Israel does it, those civilians, including 5-year-old girls, well, they were just collateral damage. Now, did they launch the rockets into Israel? No, of course not. Did they have anything to do with the rockets launched into Israel? Did the 11-month-old have anything to do with that? No, but they had to be killed because Israel wanted to send a message. And what exactly is that message? What are you sending to the world about who you are, what kind of country you are? Now, the Palestinians, through their representatives in the West Bank, have actually asked for something enormously reasonable. They have asked for statehood. Now, remember that Israel says, my God, I can't negotiate with the Palestinians because some of them don't recognize my right to statehood. While Israel is literally, at this point in time, blocking statehood for the Palestinians. One is some Palestinians don't accept it in theory, although it's a reality. The other is, I don't want it to be a reality, and I will use the power of the United States to make sure that it doesn't become a reality. They tried doing it through the Security Council, and the U.S., of course, vetoed it because we were told by our allies in Israel to do that. Now, the Palestinians, since they couldn't do it through the Security Council, are going to the General Assembly. They're going to ask on November 29th this year, 2012, of course, to get statehood through the General Assembly. Now, they won't have all the full rights that they would if they went through the Security Council, but hey, it's a step in the right direction, if you ask me. Now, I mentioned 1947 because on that same exact day, November 29th of 1947, 65 years earlier, that is exactly how the State of Israel was formed. The United Nations took a vote, and they said, okay, Israel is now a state. When the Palestinians asked for the same exact treatment as the Israelis and the U.S. says, how dare you? How dare you? Don't you know your place? Your place is to stay in the Gaza Strip and have your children be bombed because Israel wanted to send a message. Now, not only are they bragging through YouTube, the Israeli Defense Forces has a Twitter account, and how absurd is this? And they're sending taunting messages. At one point, you start to get embarrassed by this. If I was an Israeli citizen, I would be mortified by the actions of my state. As a United States citizen, I'm mortified that we back this 100%. President Obama made a deal with them for Iron Dome so that even the ineffectual missiles of Hamas does not reach Israel. Now, that's a good thing. I don't want those missiles to reach Israel. I don't want any civilians hurt under any circumstances, right? But Israel says, haha, we have Iron Dome, and it has blocked most of your missiles, which now Hamas fired back a lot of missiles, and most of them were knocked out of the sky. And then they say, we're going to bomb you anyway. Even though we have Iron Dome, and your missiles are incredibly ineffectual, it doesn't matter. Death and destruction is headed your way anyway. And then they go to Twitter and just rub it in a little bit more. They say, we recommend that no Hamas operatives, whether low-level or senior leaders, show their faces above ground in the days ahead. And then Al-Qassam Brigades responds, our blessed hands will reach your leaders and soldiers wherever they are. You opened hell gates on yourselves. Now, that's absurd. No, they didn't. And you won't reach them at all. They'll keep reaching you at a much more effective rate. I know they're angry and they're, you know, full of bluster and, oh, yeah, we're going to kill you too, etc. But you're not. You're weaker than them. And, you know, you might hate that fact, but Israel has the enormous military backing of the United States. They have F-16s. And you have these puny little missiles, most of which get knocked down by Iron Dome now anyway. So you can yell and scream about the gates of hell, but it isn't going to do you any good. In fact, they'll turn around, and after they kill the kids, they'll turn around and say, you see that? Look at these Palestinians. They want to open up the gates of hell. You see, it's all their fault. They're violent. Because after we killed them, they got angry. It's dumb. The Al-Qassam Brigades threats are dumb. Sending the missiles into Israel is dumb. It's counterproductive. The right way to do it is through the United Nations. You go and you peacefully ask for the most legitimate thing you could possibly ask for, which is the dignity of your own state. And of course, what does Israel say? Quote, Israel and U.S. strongly oppose the effort, saying all matters must be resolved through negotiations. Now, what a joke that is. Now, that's just a reporter at the Associated Press reporting on what Israel and U.S. is saying. What negotiations? What negotiations can they go to? When they go to negotiations, Israel goes, nah, I still hear there's a Palestinian somewhere that doesn't agree that Israel should be a state. Ha ha, no negotiations for you. I'm going to continue to build settlements in the West Bank. I'm going to build them in East Jerusalem. I'm about to build a park with a greatly insulting name about, ha, you don't even know what we're doing, and I'm going to take Palestinian land to do that. I'm going to do bombings in the Gaza Strip. I'm going to do every degradation I possibly can. By the way, the occupation itself is state-sponsored violence. When you say to someone, I'm going to build on your land, and if you come on that land, I'm going to kill you, that is state-sponsored violence. That is a threat of violence. That is, in fact, a legal definition of violence. If you did that here in America and you said to somebody you're going to kill them, you would be arrested. And Israel, as a state, says it all the time. I have this land. You can't have it. Here are your border controls. If you go past that border in a way I don't authorize, if you do this, this, or that I don't authorize, I will either arrest you or kill you. That is state-sponsored violence, okay? But then they say, oh, go to negotiations which don't even exist. And then finally, the Vice Premier Yalon of Israel says that if the Palestinians ask for statehood, if they dare ask for legal statehood, a peaceful solution, quote, we must take steps to make it clear there will be a heavy price. So if you do violence and you do the bombs, which I think is dumb and wrong and immoral, they say, well, you see that the Palestinians are doing violence, there will be a heavy price. If you don't do the violence and you do the same exact thing Israel did to try to get statehood through the United Nations, there will be a heavy price. I don't know why the Palestinians would complain about anything with Israel. They seem like such benevolent occupiers. Why don't you just accept your occupation, bow your head, and have them run all over you and possess your land for the rest of time? How dare you speak out? This is a monumental injustice. How long is the United States going to be behind this kind of injustice? Unfortunately, the answer is very, very long. I cannot see an end to this. And as a U.S. citizen, it makes me sick.